Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 345. Alright guys, this is going to be a good one. So this week's chapter was a set up the battles types chapter, and we're probably going to have quite a few things going on here in terms of the setups. I'm pretty happy. I think we're going to be seeing like a moving progression kind of in the battles. We're going to be having multiple phases in it. You saw in this chapter we have phase 2. I'm not sure if I said last week that we would be getting a matchup chapter, but that's what I was hoping for when we were talking about the spoilers over the live streams. Overall, I'm very happy with this. This makes sense to me. Now, in the spirit of talking about pacing, I do think we're still going relatively fast, but this is again just the rush into getting the battles set up. I think, like, you look at the overhaul arc, those guys raid in there, and then you have Sun Eater getting his fight pretty quickly after the initial setup, and everyone else running. One of the interesting things that's going to happen here is Izuku being at a different battlefield. Logically, we'll talk about it when we get there, but logically, I feel like Izuku should not be at this battlefield for long. I think that would be very unreasonable unless like they come up with reasons surrounding why Monoma can't do it. But Izuku, when he was in the overhaul arc, was ultimately very delayed getting to overhaul. You had to go through quite a few things before you actually have Izuku getting to overhaul. I'm not sure if the author's going to do it here. If you look across the series of Shonen Jump and you look at One Piece has a very clear strategy when it comes to their main protagonists and their fights. Luffy will always be the final person to fight in an arc, almost always. Like, his fight will be one of the last ones at the very least. That's what's happening in One Piece right now as well. The problem with One Piece right now is that because the Luffy fight has to happen last, the author, in order to make Luffy and that battle last across the entire final fight that they're having, had to break up the fight with things happening in between. Otherwise, when it comes to Luffy, it's just an issue of getting him away from the villain and getting him to the villain. That's usually where the delays happen as well. If you want to look at another series, One Punch Man, to deal with Saitama, what they do is delay Saitama's arrival to the main fight. The reason this is just relevant when it comes to Izuku is just the Shigaraki-Izuku fight. The earlier it happens, the more things need to happen either during the fight in terms of other characters. So if the fight happens super early, it means that a lot of the other fights are going to be interwoven into the overall Izuku-Shigaraki fight, much in the way that One Piece did it. And if you read One Piece, you know the way that the Luffy and main villain fight has been broken up. You saw the way it went down. The later the Izuku and Shigaraki fight happens, the less interruptions are going to go into that fight. And I don't know if the author actually wants to be in a situation where he's taking a break from the Izuku fight every other week the way that One Piece does it right now. Given his previous style, I don't think that's going to happen. So the reason that's relevant is just we might see a delay with Izuku getting to Shigaraki. We also have to keep in mind that the author said that Bakugo's going to have a really epic, awesome moment. The thing with that is, if you have Bakugo by himself for an extended period of time without Izuku around, that probably means that Bakugo's going to put up a really good fight against Shigaraki and really throttle him for a few chapters, which would be amazing to see, and I'm really hoping that is what we ultimately get. So ultimately here with My Hero Academia, the big thing here is the faster the Izuku-Shigaraki fight happens is the closer we're getting to the end. With some little notes being that the Shigaraki-Izuku fight might have multiple stages where Izuku has to retreat and come back. If we get there too early, there's a possibility that the author will break up the Izuku-Shigaraki fight with everyone else's fight, which I do not think would be a good idea. If we get there late, it means that we're going to be seeing a lot of Izuku going to the other battles and just kind of making himself known. But to do that, you have to justify why the heck is Izuku going to the other battles. I would say going forward, when it comes to Izuku, in my mind, the logic to me says there's no reason why Izuku can't be in front of Shigaraki next week. So if that doesn't happen, the author's going to have to, put in the work to justify why the story's going in that direction. But otherwise, I feel like my go-to sense on this thing is that Izuku is going to be away from the Shigaraki fight for a little bit. Give Bakugo some room to breathe so Bakugo can get his awesome stuff in. The reality is, like, Horikoshi thinks he's going to finish this manga by the end of the year. So the Bakugo has to get his moment sooner rather than later. So this might be the moment where he gets it. And then, yeah, just delay Izuku and then put him in with Shigaraki, and then probably just have the Shigaraki fight go it through multiple phases, an up and down kind of thing. That would be my go-to sense here. An initial delay followed by a prolonged Shigaraki fight. We'll have to see. It's honestly really interesting. I just really hope that the author doesn't do the One Piece strategy, because I'm not a fan of that strategy. I don't think it's that compelling week to week, and I think people will get frustrated. Anyway, let's get into the chapter proper and talk about more things as we go into it. And this is going to be a funny chapter as well, because this is where you like realize that this is where some things from the beginning of the series is not going to work really well here. All right, so first page is the one that sets up that Toga essentially is going to do something to Izuku because she notices Izuku is there. All right, so good on the author for setting that up. He put, Toga has a focus on Izuku. Great. On the second panel in that page is where you see Toga being picked up with a lot of villains. Now, I gotta say, I didn't expect so many villains staying in groups. So the idea was here pretty much break up the main players or like the significant villains, and then just have them surrounded by a couple of mooks. Now, All For One, I think, says something really funny later, but I just want to point you to this character right here. Good old, now allow me to butcher this name a little bit, Hanzo Suiden. Oh, and you might be wondering, hey Trip, why do you know that name? And it's because he was there during USJ. Yeah, he was there during USJ. He was one of the guys in the water. That guy. And, it's really funny that he's the one saying that, do you really think this is going to hold him? Okay, so here is where the issues begin. I don't take this seriously. Anyone that talks about the villains have an advantage in numbers forgets that My Hero Academia started with 20 kids being able to thwart a vast majority of villains. The series started with a bunch of villains coming in and being made to look like punks, alright? Like this guy got beat by Mineta, Izuku, and a frog. And Izuku didn't even touch him. He just kind of like flicked the water or whatever he did. It's been so long. Point is, these guys are all jokes. That's why I think the author is just so brazen with putting so many villains together. It's because really it's the high-end Nomu, or the near high ends, and the main people that are actually the ones that matter. It's good to know that All For One felt okay to go break out a bunch of punks that lost to a class of 20 pretty handedly. And, he didn't think to, like, save Makia or something like that. I'm just making fun of All For One. But no, like, legitimately, this is a thing about Hero Academia. Numbers don't matter. In every large-scale conflict we've seen, except maybe Overhaul's arc, we've seen that numbers don't matter Hero Academia. USJ, there were a few of the kids that ultimately did not do very well in a prolonged situation with those villains. I'm talking about Momo, Kaminari, and Jiro. But Ojiro was able to do hit and run tactics on a whole group of them and survive. Tokoyami was able to carry Koda, who doesn't have actually any combatant skills. So Tokoyami was able to survive against who knows how many. Shoto was able to just completely... Shoto was too worried about these caliber of villains. And Izuku, well, the thing is, Izuku's super strong, but Izuku, a frog, and Mineta were able to ultimately neutralize their group. These guys are ultimately jokes. And this is the big thing here. This guy is probably from one of those 6 prisons that All For One tried to bust. So now we know the caliber of those other prisons. These guys are all the rejects. These guys are the guys that failed in the first arc. A bunch of them got shown up by Aizawa, and that's saying a lot too. It's nice to see him, but this is just one of the big things where you really shouldn't put too much stock in anyone that isn't from Tartarus or isn't a Nomu, pretty much. That's what you really get here. Numbers don't matter Hero Academia. Another instance where numbers didn't matter was during Villain Fight, because Shigaraki was just wiping out so many people by himself, so was Toga, right? Numbers never matter Hero Academia. It's only named characters that matter. Actually, no. It's just... It's the ones I said earlier. It's good to see him, though, just for the connectivity, but also just incredibly hilarious. Okay, so page 2 is an important page because right after you have Toga saying break it open, you do see that there is a Nomu that really reacts here, and I think this is the Nomu that you end up seeing sitting down next to Toga. Given the way that this goes down, I know commenter White Despair was kind of worried about the Nomu, but just on the first read, it does look like Toga has command of the Nomu. We know that other people other than Shigaraki can command Nomus. I would assume that the Nomus all have like standing orders of, hey, listen to so-and-so, do whatever they say, or fight the heroes. I would say that's a pretty basic little thing here. Now, Dobby here talks about something that I'm actually really happy that the author did, specifically talking about how many seconds that they were being held for. They point out 3 seconds. I think in my example said like 4 seconds. Yeah, 3 seconds is all they really needed, and I'm glad that the author actually went in and said it. Now, in this page, what was really cool here is that you got to see a glimpse of who exactly was going towards Dobby, that being Shoto, Burnin, and Ida. I can't tell if there's someone behind Ida, but that was a really neat little thing, and I didn't notice it until, reading the proper cleaned up versions. On page 3, we just get a better look of everything. On page 3, you see that Burnin is still there, and you can see that another one of Endeavor's sidekicks was there. So again, this was just pointing towards the fact that Shoto was going to have Endeavor sidekicks on his side, while Endeavor went in a different direction. And I believe in Endeavor's shot, you can even see Kamui Woods there. So that's pretty cool. The author was dealing with very, very small drawings, but it's just incredibly neat to see how, he still puts in a little bit of detail. Really appreciate it. This is really nice. Okay, on page 4 and 5 is where I kind of question some of the wording that the translator for Viz did, but the meaning is still there. It's just like I think some equivalent phrases were better. But yeah, on page 4 and 5, you have the big climax that the idea is just to shove them all into the warp gates all at once and split them up without fail. They pretty much managed to do that with the main players. Monoma has the line, "I am the mover and shaker," and that one just sounds so goofy. Yeah, it just sounds goofy. I saw like an iteration of the line that said that he was like he was the man behind the curtain or all that kind of stuff. To me it felt a little bit goofy. That's a mileage may vary kind of thing. I really do hope still that Monoma gets more. God, I really hope they equip them with Erasure. Anyway, on page 4 and 5 is also where we see something really weird in that we see a guy with Krust's quirk, and that seems to have like his motif as well. I would say this is probably Krust's older brother. There is, on this spot here, we also have another interesting interpretation by the translator. And you know what? The translator might have done this just one-to-one, and it's other people that have also messed it up, but it was interesting. When the man is saying, "How absurd, you mammonist must have sank a fortune into the plan just for this." So in other iterations, he's saying capitalist pigs, or like, you get the idea. But calling someone a mammonist is pretty much just one devoted to the ideal of pursuit or wealth. Like Mammon, I think, is the demon for greed, if I recall. So it makes sense overall. I do think capitalist pigs might have been a little bit more up to speed for the Hero Academia reading audience, because not many people know about Mammonist. But you know what? Whatever. This is where things get a little bit interesting, because with the Liberation Front, they do have like kind of overtones. They do sound like kind of religious zealots at times. They're very sensational. So Mammonist is also very sensational. Capitalist pigs, I think, would have been just as fine. I like that he's pointing out the sinking of money in a plan for this, but it's like his organization also sinks gigantic amounts of money into everything they're doing, because their organization was about like, well, you had Detnerat on your corner, right? So this is just the pot calling the kettle black, pretty much, which is funny to see. And he is a Liberation Front person. That's why this is significantly more interesting. Who cares if Nezu has the deepest pockets in the world? Detnerat also, Redestro also put a lot of money into it. You have Skeptic who has access to satellites, right? It's just a hypocrisy in full view here, which is also really appreciated from the author. He knows what he's doing with this particular guy. Anyway, the Krust lookalike mentions that they have a strategy to counter Decay, which will probably be showcased during the Shigaraki fight. Okay, on page 6 is where you get like the most interesting thing of Izuku being snatched. Okay, so at the end of the chapter, you understand Izuku says that Danger Sense didn't go off. Given what we've seen with Danger Sense, we know that people can swat Izuku into a building and Danger Sense won't go off. Okay, we've seen that with Class 1A. This isn't surprising. Toga's also like that kind of girl, so isn't surprising. What is ultimately very unfortunate is that it looks like Izuku was, standing on the ground. He is grabbed and he is yanked into a portal by a little girl. I'm not going to call her a little girl. By a teenage girl. He is yanked in there. He is just grabbed and, just yanked in there. He doesn't even bother to, like, flick the portal. He doesn't bother to like kick the air. He has so many options available to him. Doesn't even bother to do a black whip and tie himself to Bakugo. No. No. Somehow, Izuku can just be yanked into this portal without reacting. Now, mind you, like, it kind of depends on you. Some people say, like, why wouldn't he react to this? And some people are like, well, maybe it happened too quickly. You know what? The best way to say it didn't happen too quickly is to look at the physics and just do the calculation quickly for how quickly someone can yank someone through another thing. You know, people also will ask, how did Toga know Izuku is right there enough to be able to connect to him and pull him? Because these portals, you can't see on the other side of the portal. So how did Toga manage this? You know what? It's not worth actually getting involved in it. The biggest thing that we can take away from this, the only criticism that the author seems to be willing to have people make about Izuku in this moment, he might be over-reliant on danger sense. And the reason that that is the valid criticism is because Izuku points out danger sense didn't go off. So it's just unfortunate because a whole lot of other people are reacting to these villains in real time without the aid of danger sense, and this is going to be a really bad thing for Izuku if this becomes a consistent pattern where Izuku keeps getting thwarted because he's over-relying on danger sense. For me personally, I think it's goofy that Izuku didn't react. I don't think this is happening so quickly. That said, this is honestly, I just think, where the story takes precedence over the logic. Like, the author needs this to happen, so cool. If he ultimately goes with the excuse of Izuku is over-relying on danger sense and that's ultimately dampening his reflexes, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And honestly, good way to give a penalty for danger sense. I think if there's one thing that is consistent here is that the author's done a very good job balancing danger sense. One last thing is that on this shot, you can see who was going towards Shigaraki. I think we can see Nejire, we can see Mirko, and we can see Edge Shot. So that'll be a pretty good setup on that other side there. I also like the image of Bakugo barely seeing Izuku as he goes in through the portal. It all happened so quickly is definitely what the author wants to say there. On page 7, we see the battlefield. There's a few stragglers. We see more of those indents in the ground. So there's quite a few. Like, there were quite a few cages that got created. I wonder if the author's tracking the spaces or just drawing them haphazardly. And we can also see that there were a few heroes there. Now, on page 7, this might be really important for later. But we know that Monoma is going back to Aizawa, so I really hope they'll be at a command center where Monoma can dispatch himself because he knows where everyone went, so hopefully he'll be able to do that. We also see that Fat is going to be the one dealing with capturing everyone else that's left. I really think he's going to be able to do it. You also see that Kisagiri Man is right there with Fat Gum, so that's a hero that's worked with him before back during Overhaul, really good. And then we have an interesting panel, which is actually really worth considering. Fat calls what Aoyama said a bluff. And, you know, that line happened during page 16 and 17. And so, like, I just kind of wonder, did All For One's lying sense trigger when Aoyama said that? This is the place where you fall? Because, like, even Fat Gum's pointing out that it was a bluff there. Like, how sensitive is that quirk? Because, like, I feel logically, if Aoyama says this is the place where you fall, and he knows that isn't true, would All For One get the sense that something was wrong? Or I wonder how sensitive it is. Because if All For One just in general feels, oh, I feel like animosity towards me, then he wouldn't necessarily know that that in particular is the lie if everything else is going on. Yeah, I just really wonder about that. I mean, what's interesting too is that I never thought, I didn't take that line seriously. I just thought like, oh yeah, you know, he's going to fall in this fight, right? I didn't think like, oh, he's going to fall in this particular place because we knew the separation plan was coming. But yeah, I guess that is a bluff. What's interesting too is that the author decided to have Fat Gum actually bring it up. If Fat Gum doesn't bring it up, I don't start wondering about, well, yeah, did All For One know about this? So that's just really interesting that he's acknowledging that there was some deceit there. I just wonder, like, is the quirk strong enough to... Would that quirk have been able to give All For One the heads up that he was going to be teleported away? It's really hard without knowing how exactly that quirk gives the man information. Anyway, good stuff and good to know about that situation. Good to know that Aoyama won't be doing anything else, so that's pretty cool. We move over into page 8 and page 9 where we shift to phase 2, and I love the talk of phases because I talk about phases too. So I got to give props to White Despair because like during this live stream that he was pointing out how this was actually working. But we have Hawks waiting at the mountains, and then we have him slashing at All For One. I really kind of wish that Hawks just took it to his gut instead of going for his head. I know that the head would have been, it feels like he got too greedy. If he went for the gut, at least he could have been like, that's for All Might, right? That would have been a pretty cool moment. I wonder how reinforced his vest is, though. Maybe the whole thing's super reinforced. Or maybe just run one of those blades through his knees. That would have been hilarious, too. Anyway, that was pretty good. I love that Hawks was just waiting there. He was like right next to the portal itself. That was incredibly neat. I really hope there are more heroes in this area just ready to go. If Nezu went and rebuilt the underground of this area as well, then Nezu is god tier capitalist, right? So on this fight, there are a few more considerations. There's a lot of villains here. We can see Dreadlock villain, which was in the Tartarus group, so he's still here. We see that the Pussycats came through. We see that Shishido, Ojiro's teacher, came through. I think number 13 hero. We have Kamui Woods along with Tokoyami. So Tokoyami is going to be the interesting one just because, Tokoyami relies on synergy. Tokoyami will likely be dealing with other people. If they put him up against All For One, that'd be pretty neat, but we'll have to see. We also see that there's a high-end Nomu there. Ultimately, there's a lot of villains coming through with All For One, but honestly, doesn't really matter because numbers don't matter in Hero Academia, only, like I said, with the known quantities. In this shot, like the ones that worry me just outright are, I would say, All For One, the one Nomu I can definitely see, and Dreadlocks. I mean, there's nothing really else here that looks super scary unless there's another Nomu hidden. Now, Tokoyami's presence there, one of the big questions to have is whether or not some of the fights will move underground, because if any of the fights move underground, Tokoyami's going to destroy a lot of people, which would be very cool to see. Okay, so page 10 is a perplexing page. And, I really thought that with the translations, this would be a little bit more clear, but no, it's still a weird page for what All For One says at the end here. But before we get there, ultimately, I liked what they talk about. I like seeing that Hawks has swords with him. I like that Hawks can fly on his baby wings. It was cool to have them acknowledging that they didn't think that they could actually cut off All For One's head. It's cool to know about the Ooze quirk, that they pretty much determine it's an inferior version of what Kurogiri can do, and that they have upgrades with that in mind. I also like pointing out that the man's hubris is going to be his downfall. I agree. No, 100%. This is going to be his downfall. All For One's not that smart. He's not cool, calm, and collected. So he's going to get overexcited. That's going to be his downfall. I fully agree. And then you have the really asinine comment here, splitting us up to divide and conquer. A fine plan, I suppose. That is, if you were actually hoping for a shot of victory. What kind of taunting is this? Obviously, they're hoping for a shot of victory. So you think they're not hoping for victory? I think that's the insult here. He's saying I think you guys are stupid and you're not actually going for victory. That's the only way you can really read this. Because, it's... At this point, they are hoping for victory. So, All For One just said they had a good plan. I think he should have just left it. It's a fine plan, I suppose, if you're hoping for victory. You know what? What a weird line. It's not very intimidating, and it's not very, how cool it would have been if he's like, all right, that's a pretty cool plan. That would have been significantly more respectable than whatever kind of taunting he's doing. And he is taunting. He goes in and justifies to himself, okay, yeah, dividing our forces was necessary, but Endeavor's a cruel guy. He points out that pitting One For All against Shigaraki is a very tricky bet. And you know what? Super tricky, but this is the issue here. And this carries over to the Shoto situation as well. This guy thinks that Endeavor forced Shoto to do things. And he thinks that maybe Izuku doesn't want to do this as well. No, these kids want to do it. Shoto's very happy to go up against his brother. He's very happy to be the one that ends this. So what you ultimately get here with All For One is that he's once again playing with niceties, and he's once again playing up the word game. He's getting into people's heads. He just doesn't fully... he's in this dialogue, he's not showing that he fully appreciates how heroic Izuku and Shoto are, and instead wants to focus on the negative here. And when you see unceasing abuse toward your eldest child, you can, again, that's him speaking in niceties. There's no reason to say unceasing abuse when you can just make it much more plainer. But again, All For One wants to try being Shakespearean, so that's what we have there. This is just Hammy All For One doing a Hammy All For One business once more. Now, commenters during the spoilers were pointing out that All For One is saying that you're pitting One For All against Shigaraki, and it's like, well, that's actually not what's happening right now. So it's just once again pointing at All For One not really having all the cards in his hand. Like, he's not fully aware of the situation that's going on right now. The thing again here is that All For One is just taunting, right? On page 1011, we see the heroes must die on the sign of All Might. I really hope that lady that's been cleaning that statue doesn't show up today. Like, please stay away. You have, again, just All For One saying that he's forcing Shoto to clean up his mess, but it's like, no, not really. That's not what's happening here. You get to see that the Endeavor sidekicks are here. You see Ida. He's very close to one of the high-end Nomus, so we're going to see a repeat of God Ida avoiding Nomus. This is going to be great. Hopefully Burning is able to take out that brain. And yeah, I've got nothing else really to say on this page. The Shoto Dobby lineup looks pretty good here. Page 12-13, we go to UA. Was not expecting UA to be floating in the sky at this stage. It's turned into like an anti-Shigaraki zone. I am very interested to know what this net is. I'm interested to know what's going to happen here. It looks like this is going to be a high maneuverability area. It looks pretty cool in almost every way here. Now, I personally thought that, you know, Attack on UA was going to be one of the final things we did. Good on the author for kind of playing with that and instead having UA be the place that invades Shigaraki in a way. I think this is super cool. I don't think the civilian shelters are up there. I can't wait to see how exactly this Wonderland's going to form. I feel like having Bakugo here, this is going to do so much for Bakugo. Like, this man's going to be able to throttle Shigaraki pretty good without Izuku for a while. I hope, that's my hope. If we get to see a repeat of joint training with Bakugo and Shigaraki, that would be amazing. I also, just because of, like, there's so many threads going all over the place, it reminds me of World Trigger tactics. And you know, if Horikoshi wants to go in there and do some World Trigger type maneuvers with the wires, that wouldn't be too bad. The issue is, like, Bakugo has inherently more mobility, so if he's able to use the wires and Bakugo to some good degree, that would actually be really, really cool. I do feel bad that Shigaraki showed up in just his cape and not a business suit, because that severely depowers Best Jeanist, though. We then move on into the final matchup here, page 14 and 15, where we see that they're at an aquarium. We see that there's two high-end Nomus, or near high-ends. Sorry, I keep calling them high-ends, but... and we see Izuku talking about Danger Sensitive Trigger, and Toga ever so playfully pulling Izuku with a very tiny wire. Oh, you can see that the wire goes between her legs. Very seductive. I'm sure she's a child, Horikoshi, but whatever. Doesn't matter. It's Japan. One of the things that surprised me here is that Ochako and Tsuyu went into this area and they weren't supported by Nejire. I really thought that you would have more support coming in from... well, we don't know where Ryukyu is yet, so maybe Ryukyu shows up next time, but... yeah, no, that's a little surprising thing. Gang Orca's over there too. So my thing here is that we saw Fat Gum. He had communications up. And the communications being up pretty much just says that All For One didn't unleash any last minute EMPs to short out communications. So that's good. All For One's not very clever. In my mind, I don't see any reason why Gang Orca wouldn't just phone in to the command center and be like, hey, Izuku's over here. We kind of need to move our tactical weapon to the place he actually has to be. Like, quite literally, you have God going up against Small Fries over on the other side. So please get Izuku over there. But we'll have to see what actually goes down here with Toga. Also, I'm looking at Izuku there holding the wire. And again, props on Toga for being able to hook the syringe into Izuku's glove and be able to yank him. But Izuku... you're like a god in human form at this point. Just snap the wire. Don't bother like unwinding it. Just tear it off. Please, next chapter, please, Izuku, just tear it off. God, if Izuku does a thing with like he did with Nagant, where he just like grabs the wire and starts talking to Toga without neutralizing the threat that wire is able to, that poses to him, or that tube poses to him, that's going to be extremely hilarious, but also mildly like, oh, come on, Izuku, just rip it off. But we'll have to see. I remember there was someone on the live stream that kind of talked about this a little bit. It might have been Miguel, but I don't really remember. Izuku being there with Ochako is just a little concerning, because Izuku might take up Ochako's screen time. And Ochako really needs all the screen time she can get. And honestly, I really thought the Ochako Toga thing was going to be just those two. But Horikoshi also said the Ochako Toga thing, there was like, it's going to be significantly those two. So Toga might go on to have stuff later. Like, we still don't know what exactly is going to happen to a Twice thing. I gotta say props to Horikoshi because I didn't expect this level of a mess up. It's a pretty good shakeup. People on the live stream were also pointing out that, yeah, Toga's a super wild card in this regard, and this might be pointing to the fact that there's not really a lot of harmony within the villain group, which I think is a really valid point. Ultimately really tricky, and I think really good. Also, I'm just looking, like, the girl has that tube tied up around her pinky so well, like it's a red string of fate. Like, if Izuku just yanks on that pinky right now, he breaks it. But no, can't have that kind of level of competence here. God damn it. You know, in rodeo, there's like there's a death grip that you have that involves wrapping your pinky on the rope. It's just that's what I'm thinking of here, but I don't think that would go that easily. Anyway, any other things to say about this? I still think that Toga's gonna be flipped to the other side. I think by the end of this, everyone's gonna be trying to save Shigaraki, the villains included. So now it's just going to be really interesting to see what exactly Horikoshi decides to do next week. Seeing what One Piece has done these past 2 years, I really hope that we concentrate on the fights. I hope that there's minimal shifting between fights. During the war, we had I think it was like one chapter in each location. Maybe most of the time it was alternating. I have to go back and read that, but we have 3 significant locations: Dobby, Toga, and All for One. Oh, and Shigaraki, so 4 significant locations. It would be quite tiring if we actually had to go alternate between those 4 locations every single week. Yeah, hopefully next week we just concentrate like 70% on one area and then 30% on the rest. Anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below, and until next time. Hero Academia is entering its final war, but there might be multiple phases to this fight. We know that a plan A and a plan B exist. The rules of narrative says that plan B is going to happen, so plan A will fail. There's still a lot of unknowns. I think we're in for a pretty cool ride. For whatever reason, Horikoshi thinks he can finish this in like 40 chapters if he wants to finish this year. I don't think that's a reasonable thing, but we'll have to see where we go. Here we go. It's going to be a fun one. Anyway, everyone, till next time.